Going to the gym can be discouraging, especially if you're putting in the work but barely seeing changes. But with Tonal, you can actually see your progress with every workout. Tonal provides the convenience of a full gym and the expertise of a personal trainer anytime at home with one sleek system. Designed to reduce your mental load, Tonal is the ultimate strength training system, helping you focus less on workout planning and more on getting results. No more second-guessing your technique. Tonal gives you real-time coaching cues to dial in your form and help you lift safely and effectively. After a quick assessment, Tonal sets the optimal weight for every move and adjusts in 1-pound increments as you get stronger, so you're always challenged. Tonal lets you choose from a variety of expert-led workouts, from strength to aero hit to yoga and mobility, to keep you coming back for more. For a limited time, go to Tonal.com to get $500 off your Tonal purchase, plus a free 4-year warranty. That's Tonal.com for $500 off, plus a free 4-year warranty. Tonal.com.
Glocks suck 16%. That's a bold statement. Show your math. Well, I will on this episode. How the Glock stacks up to other platforms and some surprising results of some range testing. It's settled science. That's what we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am blessed to serve you as host. I'm going to go through the whole bio. There'll be some cliff notes in the show notes. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Let's dive into today's episode. So let me paint you a little picture, a little background. I'm out here at the backyard range. I am blessed to live in wild, rugged, and free open country where I can just shoot on thousands of acres of public land, enjoying the freedom, trying to turn God's talents that He's given me and resources into more skill. To you has, more shall be given, and He will have an abundance. Right, so I'm trying to live that abundant life and make those skills more abundant. I was out testing some pistols, and I guess I should back up. I was talking to one of the guys in the tribe, in the chat. I did an interview with him a while ago. His name is Troy. I'm sure you can find it. But much like me, a Marine Corps veteran, much like me, an accomplished competition shooter, we got to talking about Glock and how Glocks stack up to other pistols. And I was mentioning how other pistols were faster, better. And he said, yeah, but maybe by a couple of percent. And I thought, that is interesting. I've got guns, by God's grace. I have ammo, by God's grace. I have a range, by God's grace. Let me go out and test this. For me, when fired out of my guns, trying to go fast and dirty, as fast as I can. Going fast, taking chances, running it fast, dirty, and hopefully clean. Let's see how these pistols stack up. So that was the premise of this shooting. Now, all the pistols I'm going to talk about in this section have factory triggers. The Glock is one I keep around for training for work when I'm required to carry a Glock. It's a stock Glock 17 factory option night sights, factory trigger. I shot it against an M17 factory flat trigger with an RMR and STI, my old STI, my old duty gun, and a SIG 226. Oh, and for control, I started out with a 22, the SIG P3 22, just, to get some drills down before I switched to the center fire. For the 22, I shot a bill drill. And if you don't know what a bill drill is, it is draw and shoot 6 rounds as fast as you can. Should be in the A zone of a target on a USPSA target. I didn't have any USPSA targets at the time. I shot it on an 8-inch steel with the 22. And then I switched to, and it's done at 7 yards generally. You can do it at other distances, but 7 yards, and I did it on a reduced size silhouette target, so smaller than an actual man-size silhouette, but a reduced size target, as fast as I could go and get hits. I shot a ton of ammo. These are to eliminate variables like a sloppy draw or a slow draw, or I messed something up, or I outran the trigger or something like that. I threw out all the slowest ones to get rid of that junk, that noisy data, and the 2 fastest of every gun. And I shot hundreds of rounds. I shot a ton of rounds to get this data. So it's not just like these 2 runs, right? It's a pretty good data set. So bill drill, 7 yards. Mind, these are factory trigger guns. The Glock 2.59 and 2.41. Those were the fastest runs. How does that compare to other guns? M17, also a polymer striker fire, but I would, even a factory trigger, much better trigger, much better gun in my opinion. But so 2.20 and 2.16. The STI 2.08 and 2.13. And keep in mind, this was draw, like relaxed, hands aside, not hands touching the gun, not cheating or anything. Relaxed, hands aside, draw 6 shots, hitting that small, reduced size silhouette at 7 yards as fast as you can. 6 shots, only hits count. That was the data. And I thought, just since I had it out there, I'll go and shoot one of my favorite carry guns, my SIG 226 Legion. See how it stacks up against the STI, just for fun. The 226, 2.11 and 2.07. That was very surprising to me. That knocked my socks off. Now, we'll come back to that. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on it. But if we do some of that math, we look at 2.59 and 2.41 for a factory Glock versus, let's take the STI, 2.08 and 2.13. There is an advantage there to that gun. There is an obvious advantage. It's not the only drill that I shot. Next, I did a good old Mozambique drill from the draw. Draw, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. Now, I should mention, these were in different holsters, but they were all in very close holsters. Level 1, retention, strong side hip holsters. I'm not messing around with any of that appendix junk. No Miami Vice, chest draw. Mozambique drill. 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. Draw, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. With the STI, I got a 1.50 and a 1.52. With a 226, a 1.51 and a 1.60. And with the Glock, a 1.75 and a 1.69. And again, hundreds of rounds were shot to achieve this data. Now, if my math is mathing correctly, if I am doing the algebra correctly, on the bill drill, the Glock was 16.4% slower than the 226, than the SIG Legion 226. 16.4% crappier. Well, you might think, well, the Glock is how can you expect it to stand up against a, SIG 226 Legion, single action only? I don't. I'm not surprised by these results, but it gives hard data, right? You might think, well, 16%, and that's not enough to spend twice as much money. And if you don't have the money and the money to train on ammo, I would agree. I've been in that spot before. I shot competitions for years and years with polymer striker fire. Can get fast with a polymer striker fire. But there are almost inarguably better guns out there. I don't have a ransom rest, but I don't think anybody would argue that the STI, the SIG 226 Legion is going to be, especially with the Barstow barrel I have in it, more accurate than the Glock. Heck, even the M17. So faster and more accurate. Some of you may say that, that much extra performance is not worth the extra money. Now, I got that STI. It's an STI Marauder. Now their Staccato, I guess the closest model they make now would be the XL, which is like a $4,000 or more handgun, not to mention the $800 or so in the optics mounting and optic. Like, it's not a cheap gun. That's not what I paid for it. I bought way back before John Wick was rocking a Staccato. I was rocking that STI as a duty gun before they were even Staccato, right? I've had that gun a long time. I forget what I paid for it, but it wasn't that much, but I don't know what it is adjusted for inflation. But that gun's expensive. The 6-hour Legion, they're, $1,200 to $1,400-ish. They're still quite a bit more than a Glock. Also, 16% better. I would argue that the SIG 226 is every bit as rugged, reliable, durable as a Glock. You could argue with that and emote about that, but show me some data on that the SIG 226 is not as reliable and dependable as the Glock. I must note it's the Legion model and it's the single action only. I do not think that I would have been as fast with the double single action. that have to do more, and doing more means you generally have to go slower. That's just how that works. You can get mad if you want, but I like a single action only. I like a thumb safety. Call me a contrarian. I think there's some real distinct advantages on thumb safeties on handguns, which I've probably talked about before, but this is not the episode for that. But 16.4% spanking the little pants off of the Glock. Now, is that worth it? Again, you might think, well, for the money, no, it's only 16% better and it's twice the cost. Well, much like anything, like you get a good value in something, and then to get quite a bit better than the value, you have to spend quite a bit more to get more performance. It's the same way with guns. Maybe it's not worth it for you. It's worth it for me if somebody's trying to kill me. If you've ever been in the unpleasant situation of having somebody try and kill you, shooting at you, I don't think you're going to turn your nose up at faster and more accurate. Now, I'll concede that in some situations it won't make any difference, right? If somebody's on top of you, shivving you in the liver, and you grab your gun out of the holster and shove it into them and pull the trigger a bunch of times, fast it returns to point of aim, point of impact, and, accuracy at 50 yards, stuff like that, really not going to make a big difference. I'll totally concede that that's very possible. It's also possible that you may have to make a very hard shot under a stressful situation where time is of the essence, where if you don't get him, you're going to be dead. And in those situations, I'll take that 16.4%. I will also throw out there that was a factory Glock, factory option nights. I think there's a N.R.A, but they're a factory Glock option and a factory trigger. This also was at one time one of my old duty guns. I use it to train for my current duty gun. I use it a lot of times if I'm teaching or something like that, because I don't want people to think that all the shooting skill is just because of a fancy gun. But it does make a difference. Anyway, you can polish that turd of the Glock. You can get that crappy trigger fairly decent, and you can do it fairly cheaply. The old standby, and I've been shooting Glocks. I've started shooting them in competitions, in the mid-aughts. I was carrying them L.A.P.D. before that. Not before the mid-aughts, but before I started competition, practical pistol competition, that is. Anyway, the old standby was a lighter striker spring and a 3.5 ghost connector, or the 3.5 connector. At first it was the OEM connector, then the ghost connector. You might hear it called the race connector. And that's, $20-$40. It's not quite as smelly a turd when you do that to the Glock trigger. It's a little bit better. Whether Glock approves that for you to actually use as a defensive firearm, I don't know. There are entire drop-in triggers for the Glock. There are a lot of aftermarket Glock stuff because they are so ubiquitous and the triggers are so bad. Right? If the Glock was actually perfect out of the box, nobody would modify the trigger, right? But many people do, because it is so bad. So I will concede that you can get a Glock trigger much better than it is out of the factory. But then you could say the same thing for any of those guns. All the rest of those guns also had a factory trigger. As far as I know, I bought the SIG 226 used, but I believe it's like a factory option set up from SIG. But you could say the same thing about that. That STI, since it was an old duty gun, it's got the factory trigger. It doesn't have, a hair trigger. It doesn't have a 1.5 pound trigger. It's got a regular duty weight trigger. I haven't done anything to that trigger other than put a trigger shoe on it, I think. It doesn't affect the trigger pull. It just affects the generosity in which I can place my finger on the trigger. So 16.4% slower. And I will point out that is why there are divisions in competition shooting. That is why you don't generally see polymer striker fired handguns going toe-to-toe with 1911s, 2011s. They made separate divisions just so those people could be competitive. If they were just as good as, then you would see Glocks running against STIs, and you generally don't because they can't. You might find a guy that can shoot a Glock faster than a lot of guys can shoot an STI, but a guy with equal skill and equal training on each platform will almost certainly shoot the STI faster, better, more accurate. Or the SIG 226 apparently. That is why there are divisions in competition shooting. Case settled. The science is settled. That's why. They're not as good. But wait, there's more. I did another drill. Here are some numbers to ruminate on. Draw. 8-inch steel plates at 12 yards. 2 hitch on each plate. 2 plates. 12 yards, 8-inch steel plate. So basically a head size. And 1 hit on a reduced size silhouette target at 54 yards. Again, I shot a bunch of rounds, not just a one run, but the fastest of each one. The STI 5.03. The SIG Legion, that is, the SIG 226 Legion 5.01. Again, the STI 5.03 and the SIG 5.01. The M17 5.03. And the Glock 6.47 with a bunch of misses. I've even put a little asterisk there, a bunch of misses, so less data on average on that one because it was so hard to get the hits quickly at much greater distances. That scores in seconds. So draw 2 head plates at 12 yards, 2 shots on each, and 1 hit at 54 yards on a steel plate. STI 5.03, SIG 5.01, M17 5.03. And the Glock struggling there at 6.47. And again, I shot several runs to get the data. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. So I was not surprised by the Glock being slower. I knew it was slower, but by how much? I would have said anywhere between 5 and 10%. It was more than that. At least on that one drill that I actually did the math on. An average, you can do a bunch of the math on the other drills if you want. And results may vary for you, right? This is me shooting these drills out of my guns. And I will point out that as far as professional training goes, I've probably had more on the Glock than anything else. So it's not like I don't shoot the Glock. I often have to carry a Glock for work. I'm a private security contractor, so I begrudgingly carry it. I went to the L.A.P.D. Police Academy with a Glock. I've done a bunch of other courses and classes, professional classes, and training with a Glock. Some of the best training I think our government can offer with a Glock. So I have a ton of training with a Glock. It's not like I don't ever shoot Glock. Probably have more professional training with a Glock than the other platforms. So it's not a training thing. It's not like a time on platform thing. If you're fast with a Glock, I bet you if I put an STI staccato in your hands, you're going to be faster and more accurate. Just for being honest with yourself and trying to go as fast as you can, as accurately as you can. I think unless there's some weird thing, the vast majority of people in my training and experience are going to be faster and more accurate with a better gun. And on better gun, I pretty much can say that. I can argue with that, but if the gun is faster, more accurate, and in the case of the 226, as rugged and reliable, how is it not better? Question mark. Silence from the audience, right? How is it not better? You could say if you just like to play Barbie with it and like dress it up and put a bunch of different accessories on it, there are more accessories available for the Glock. If that's the only really thing you could say, but more, faster, more accurate, as rugged and reliable and dependable. So how is it not better? And on that did surprise me that the SIG 226 Legion kept up with the STI. It either was neck and neck with it, slightly slower or slightly faster, but it was right there within the margin of error. Like 5.03, 5.01. Like, that's pretty fast. And some of the drills have beat it. That astounded me. I was not expecting that. One, because not because of any, secret sauce in an STI, but because the STI weighs quite a bit more. That STI weighs in the 40 ounces range, and the 226 Legion is in the 30-something ounces range. There's a couple more ounces on there for each one for the optic, but it's got exactly the same optics. I should point out the M17, the Staccato, the Legion, they all have Trijicon RMRs, dual illuminated, fiber optic tritium. They all have the same optic. One's tan, but I don't think that makes it any faster. Right, so the fact that the 226 could even keep up, with the Staccato surprised me, just on weight alone. Now, I will say, the STI, I don't think they're overpriced. They're a fantastic gun. 1911s are a complicated machine. To do that all right and get them crazy reliable, I don't think I had a single malfunction. I can't remember the last time I had a malfunction with the STI. I'm sure I have years ago, but that thing's so slick and broken in now that, man, I can't even remember how many recoil springs I've been through on that thing and how well it still shoots. But to make one that's rugged and reliable and very accurate and tight fitting so it fits up tight like a bank vault, it takes money. And I don't begrudge STI or Staccato for what they charge for their guns. And I will say it is probably the most pleasant gun to shoot. It is more like riding a Cadillac. A Cadillac may not be any faster than other cars out there, but it's kind of the luxury car in that when you're driving fast, it feels smooth. I've never actually owned a Cadillac, but assume that's true. That it's probably the most gentle and forgiving and comfortable gun to shoot, that S.T.I. But even so, that 6226, even being lighter, was just as fast or faster on some drills, or marginally within the margin of error. That surprised me. So, one, I'm glad I have it as a carry gun. That's fantastic. I'm very blessed to have that gun. Now, a fair criticism would be those other guns have optics and the Glock doesn't. And that's a fair criticism. I will say, though, like on that last drill I talked about with the steel at different distances, yeah, that optic is going to be faster. That's one of the reasons I use them. However, on a bill drill at 7 yards, I don't really think it is really any faster, because I'm just hammering on that gun and going as fast as I can. That gun returns point of aim, point of impact. Just trying to hit that steel reduced size silhouette at 7 yards fast. And I don't think the optic really helps there. That's where I got that 16% from. So that is some data for you guys to ruminate on, to chew on. For the tactical tip of the day, I will throw out a little bit on technique. There are times when I don't, but in general, for my technique, I like to shove both arms and elbows locked straight out. There are a lot of really good shooters that shoot with bent elbow, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are a lot of really good shooters that shoot bent elbow. It's not like one of those settled things where everybody agrees that, like, you don't do the cup and saucer technique. Pretty much nobody does the weaver anymore. That's ancient. Like, I don't know any top shooters that shoot the weaver, and they haven't for a long time. But bent elbow is one of those things that's kind of a preference. But one big reason I like to shoot with my elbows fully straight out and extended is consistency. So, if my elbows are bent, to what degree? Are they bent, probably not 45 degree, maybe 30 degree this time, 35 degree, 25 degrees if they're bent. I know they're bent in exactly the same way every time. That's going to be harder to be consistent for accuracy. The key to accuracy is doing, the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result, because you're eliminating variables. Well, if my elbows are straight and locked out, then they can only be so straight, right? They can't be, they're straight. That's it. They're out as far as they can go. I can have inconsistencies in other places, but that eliminates one. That's one of the reasons I like it. You may or may not. You may have physical limitations or something that don't let you shoot that way. There are plenty of good fast shooters that shoot bent elbow. But I just thought I would throw that out there. I've been shooting a lot of rounds recently, been blessed to make some decent money at the private security contracting and buying a bunch of ammo and shooting a bunch of ammo and trying to refine my technique. Hopefully getting better, faster. By God's grace, we go into a shooting competition tonight. You're never perfect at shooting. You can always be better at shooting. It's one of the reasons I love it. One of the reasons it can be so frustrating. Especially handgun requires dedication and practice continuously. It's a perishable skill. You're not dry firing. You're not putting rounds down range. Not using the talents and resources God's given you to multiply them. But think about that. I'm sure it'll be contentious. I can live with that. Your tactical verse of the day. I guess we talked about the talents first, so let's throw that one out there for the tactical verse of the day. You'll find this in the Gospel of Matthew. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, if you read that parable, it's a parable about a lord or a king, I forget, that goes and gives talents to each man, and some of them use them wisely, and some are afraid and don't use them at all. And the ones who don't use them, they're taken away, and the ones that do use them, they are multiplied. Now, a talent back then was a unit of money, but I think it's pretty cool that it's called a talent. Anyway, that's your tactical verse of the day to think on, to meditate on, hopefully. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.